Hey everyone, it's Mr. Thrive and Survive. I hope everybody's doing fantastic out there. Just want to introduce the players here. We're going to look at submarines and destroyers in the ocean and the earth and put it all together. And I want to show you how submarines work in the Navy and on the globe and things like that. So here's our players, our actors in this stage. We have the submarine over here on the right, and we have a destroyer on the left, and this is supposed to represent the ocean on a globe model. And of course we have the clouds and things like that. It's a very bright white day, so wanted to show some good contrast there. So let's get into this, shall we? Now let's look at a couple of the functions of a submarine and how dangerous they can be. We're going to look at what steers a submarine and what causes it to achieve something called neutral buoyancy in the oceans itself. But as you can see from this picture right here, sometimes the submarines have to hover barely on top of the ocean floor. This is a lot of the reason why we have the ocean floors mapped out and why we know, for example, most of the Pacific is a plain, because we have mapped all of this. One of the reasons being so that submarines will not suddenly end up running into the ground and having problems like that. So a submarine can actually be like this a few feet off the ocean surface and remain that way as long as they know how deep it is. They have things aboard so that they can make sure they stay at that exact depth. So let's take a look at another picture here. We have a submarine here that's showing a cross section. Of course, this is CGI, but submarines also will tend to stay, generally speaking, 30 feet below the water. It varies a little, but let's use 30 feet as an average, sometimes a little bit more shallow, sometimes a little deeper, so that they can put a periscope up. They can put a periscope up, and then they can look around and see what's going on, see if there's any enemies around, see if there's any friendlies around, things like that. Sonar, as we're going to look at in a little bit, is one of the ways that a submarine can look under the water and shoot things out to see if there's other metal that comes back. For example, it's like sonar is underground radar. That's the best way to look at that. There are some differences, but I want to get mostly into the steering and how does a ship like this, a submarine ship like this, stay 20 feet under the water without coming up accidentally and surfacing or going down too far, so that when the captain wants to take a look around, he can't stick that up and see what's going on. So let's see how that works here in a minute. Now this gives you the different parts of a submarine, and you can look some of these things up online and see for yourself. These actually act much like an aircraft does, and we're going to talk about aircraft in this video as well. But the main thing I want you to pay attention here is two things. I want you to understand how the submarine reaches a certain depth and then can stay at that depth forever without coming up or going down, because that is the end of a submarine. If a submarine is spotted, it can end its life. We're going to show a destroyer here, as you saw. Sailplanes. This is what I want to get into right here. Sailplanes, okay, are located usually on the top front part or front middle part of a submarine, and also in the rear. We're going to look at the rear in particular, but just know that there is some trim that they can do up front to make this more exact. For example, if they want to go down at a 1 degree angle at a time, they can set these very precisely today, so that they go down 1 degree angle per whatever feet they travel, or per mile, whatever. These stern plates here are what we're going to look at, but and of course you have the propeller behind here which drives it. These rudders, they are used mostly for turning left and right. We're not going to deal with that in this video. We're just going to deal with going up and down in the water. So we're going to see a submarine chasing a supposed enemy destroyer, and we want to figure out how can the submarine possibly stay at a certain depth and not go down anymore. Two things have to happen. Unlike things that are above the ground like an aircraft, which has to overcome, according to science, gravity. Okay, speaking of airplanes, let's take a look at the contrast here and part of why I'm doing this video.
The problem on a globe, according to those who believe in the true flat earth model, is the fact that if a plane above a ball is traveling, let's say 35,000 feet, and maintains level according to its gyroscope, it will over time, let me switch the picture here, it will over time, as it's flying level, and this is an excellent video here. I will put a card up here right now so that you can go check out this video. It's fantastic. It's called Flat Earth Proof number 8, and the channel name is called Feed Your Mind. In any case, let's do a little graphic here so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's assume this airplane is at 35,000 feet cruising altitude. He goes into great detail to show how gyroscopes on an aircraft are set to perfectly level when they are level on the ground. They have to show any deviation from that. When they get up, they take off, they go immediately up to the cruising altitude. Again, we're going to assume 35,000 feet in this example right here. So what we say is if you're on a ball, that you would fly out into space, because you would have to constantly be angling down to cover the curve of the Earth. Now, the answer that is given by those who want to believe in the fallacy of the ball is that the ever magical gravity is the reason. Somehow gravity knows that this plane is at 35,000 feet and knows to keep it at 35,000 feet. It has this knowledge. My thing is, how does it not know it's at 40,000 feet? Sometimes it is. How does it know not to keep it at 40,000 feet? In any case, they say gravity somehow keeps the plane from flying off and keeps it at 35,000 feet no matter how far it goes around the globe. So that is the plane argument. Gravity is the reason. Let's go back to our example and see how that all ties in.
The submarine doesn't deal with gravity. The submarine deals with buoyancy, and buoyancy only. What the submarine will do is it will blow air out of its tanks and become buoyancy neutral, so that if no other forces were acting upon the submarine whatsoever, it would just sit there. It wouldn't sink, it wouldn't float, it's just buoyancy neutral. In essence, it becomes the same buoyancy as the ocean around it. Now, that can get complex. Temperatures of the water can be involved, salinity, different factors. We're going to try to keep it simple here. So, if you turn a propeller on and you're buoyancy neutral, the submarine will obviously move, but how do you keep it from going down or up? Even though it's buoyancy neutral, if you have your sails off even by a little bit, this is going to dive or come up. Now, let me cover real quickly if a submarine needs to rise very rapidly or sink very rapidly, they change the buoyancy also. They change the sails and they change the buoyancy. If they need to dive from the surface, well, let me go and let's take a look at that. Now, this is a little crude here, I admit it, but I'm putting a larger sail on the back here to show you. Now, let's assume that the bubbles have been blown out here to where this is buoyancy neutral. And all of a sudden, this submarine finds, let's say, an enemy ship, a destroyer in the distance. How is that shown? Let's just go ahead and show it here. So, now forget about this cursor here. I've recorded this so many times, it's crazy. As this goes down, the rudder, the sail, as the sail is pointed downward, it forces the water up as it's moving forward, forces it up in the back, which points the front of the submarine down. So as we continue this, you see the submarine goes down. Again, it's buoyancy neutral. So because the propeller is working and the sail in the back is pointed down, it's not at 90 degrees, Let's say they want to go down at a 20-degree rate. Well, they would tilt this down at 20 degrees, and the front would go down by 20 degrees. That's why it's important to have it buoyancy neutral. You don't have to have all kind of fancy calculations to say, oh, where we have a little slight tendency to float, so we got to make this slightly more than 20 degrees. No. This thing is all done with precision. So as you can see, now, there's no blowing out of the tanks of air or water. That's very important. Now, as you can see, this is back to a neutral position, 90 degrees to the surface. In this case, the ship continues now in a straight, level position.
Now, I'm spending a lot of time right here, guys, because this is the most important point of this entire video. The submarine gets itself into a position of what I'm calling buoyancy neutral. What exactly does that mean? That means that left on its own, this submarine would just sit here. Imagine it's a nice still ocean. There is no gravity pulling it down, and the buoyancy of the water is not pushing it up. There is a perfect mixture of air and water in the tanks, in the what's called the ballast tanks, in the submarine, so that there are no forces of gravity, or better yet, since you're in the ocean, buoyancy. It is neutral. That's why I'm calling it buoyancy neutral, so that you have this sail and the other sails, when you have those at 0 degrees or parallel, as long as your rudder is moving to push it, it will stay parallel. If you start 10 inches under the sea, forget about wave heights and things like that. It's a perfectly calm sea, let's say. If you're 10 feet under when you start, 35 hours later, as long as you haven't changed the trim on this, you're still going to be 10 feet under. This is exactly what submarines want to get to. Again, why? Because this blowing out of bubbles and changing the ballast in the tanks creates noise. It makes it easy for the enemy to find a submarine. Most submarines today in the military are nuclear powered, so that there is no combustion engines like that are going to make sounds. You've heard the term probably, at least in the United States, run silent, run deep. So if they want to change by 10 degrees, if they want to go down 10 degrees, per so many feet, they will change this to 10 degrees. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. This is extremely important concept to get. There is no gravity here, and in essence, really, there is no buoyancy. It's perfectly neutral. Let's continue.
So hopefully that explains how that works. Now, if the ship wants to go back up, they just do the opposite. They would just point this up, and the ship would go up. There's no additional noise added. That's an important thing. There's no additional noise blowing out of bubbles and things like that. So this buoyancy neutral is a very important concept to have, and to understand how the sails cause this to go up and down is extremely important.
Okay, let's look at a real life scenario. We've explained everything. We are buoyancy neutral here. Once the destroyer suspects there may be a submarine nearby, he will ping to see if the destroyer is out there. That might go something like this. So what he wants to do is he wants to maintain a distance behind where the pinging can reach him. And it can get a little bit more complex than that, but let's make it simple. What he also wants to do is he doesn't want to fall behind or gain on him because of that. He doesn't want to fall behind, of course, and lose him. And he doesn't want to come into his ping range. So to ensure that, what he does is he stays just below the surface, as you can see here. And he's got his sails set at 0, just like we showed, and he's buoyancy neutral, so he doesn't have to make any noises, and he just moves through the water, and well, let's see how that works. So he chases this, and sometimes, guys, these chases can go on not only for miles and miles, but days at a time. So let's take a look how that would look. Now that we're going to put it in motion, he wants to stay just below so he can be at periscope depth as the destroyer is moving on by. And this goes on and on for depending how long. Oh, wait a minute, he's starting to come up here, it looks like. So maybe we don't have everything set at 0. Let's go ahead and check that. Okay, I think I've got everything set here now. So again, we're running this on the globe model. It should work because we don't have gravity or buoyancy that's in any kind of effect with us. We've got our rudder set at 0. We start the animation. He's at about 30 feet below sea level so that he can stick his periscope up if he needs to. He's staying outside of the range of the ping. And shoot, he's back up there again. Let's take a look at that. Okay, guys, what I did here was I put a level on here so that we can make sure that he is straight and everything. I think we got it now, so let's run the animation one more time and show you how this should work. There we go. All right, he's about 30 feet periscope depth. The destroyer's moving. He's staying out of range of the ping. And he continues on and on. I'll be darned, he's actually coming up again. Hold on. Okay, what I've done is I have zoomed in. I put him right at the surface of the water, which we know is flat. And I put a line above him. Now let's go ahead and zoom all the way out. Oh, can you see the problem, guys? Can you see the problem on the globe? See, the water is not flat on a globe. It has to curve to go along with the ball. So, if you go ahead and let's go ahead and put another line in there. Look at this. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little more if we can. Look at this right here. Look at this. See? He's eventually going to come on up and out of the water. Has to happen that way. Has to happen. If it's on a globe model, submarines obviously do not work. They cannot work. Because if the water is curved, which it has to be on a ball, a submarine could never maintain its level. There is no gravity involved here. Look it up everywhere. They become buoyancy neutral. And they do that for more than one reason. Not to be caught in war is a main reason. But as you drag this out, as you can see, the further you would go, the more the submarine would surface if he has his rudders at 90 degrees. There is absolutely no compensation for a curved ball. Ask anybody that's been on a submarine. The trim is put to 0 degrees. And so if you're 30 feet under the water and you go 10 miles chasing a submarine, well, guess what? You're going to come up 66 feet, aren't you? Well out of the water. So just like the airplane example, except this time nobody can use gravity as the excuse. You can't use it, guys. I'm sorry. You can't use it with this. It's all buoyancy. And that's the end of this story. The Earth is flat. This is a slam dunk. It just is. Submarines could not function on a curved ball. There's no way. The calculations would be unbelievable because they have different speeds and things like that that they're traveling. Take care, guys. Bye.